And we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to A Bookish Moment. I'm Sarah Burr.
And I'm J.C. Kenny, and we've got a great friend and fabulous author visiting again with us, Sarah. So I think it's time to get bookish.
Yes, my favorite thing to be, especially on a kind of overcast, dreary Tuesday afternoon for us here in New York. But we are delighted to be joined by the wonderful Nicole Leiren, who is here with us to celebrate book 2 in her new series. We are going to be chatting about vengeful conspiracies as we talk about con artist Sadie and see what she is up to in her new adopted hometown of Wilson, Texas. So we're going to have some fun today. Want to say a shout out to our folks that are popping into the chat as we all get settled in. We've got Sarah saying hello, Farmhouse Reader saying good afternoon all, and DHB saying happy Tuesday. So we've got a nice assemblance of greetings. Hi everyone from Mizan. Wonderful. And Ryan, hello. Thank you for being here. All right, you guys. Thanks. If you have any questions for Nicole as we go through today's conversation, feel free to drop them to the chat. We always love hearing from you and seeing what's on your minds. But before we get too far into the weeds, Nicole, for folks who may not be familiar with you and your work, any chance you'd like to share a little bit about your writing history, what got you into writing cozy mysteries, and what brings you here today?
All right, awesome. Well, thank you, Sarah and JC, for having me here today. It's an honor to be here, and I always have so much fun with you guys. So thank you for letting me come back and hang out for book 2. I started writing, gosh, I don't even know when I started. I was a kid, right? And I would, write little stories for my sister. My dad used to tell us stories about, he would make up about Wee Willie Ant. And I don't know if that was a real character he read about when he was a kid, but I would then start writing stories for Wee Willie for my sister. And then, through my teenage years, I explored, the whole poetry and diarying and journaling and things like that as young girls are prone to do, and maybe boys too, I don't know. And then I got into fan fiction and started having so much fun playing in that playground and playing with other people's characters. And after several years of doing that, and I decided that, I would like to try my own. Which, just for the official record, way harder than using already established characters and plot lines, right? When you have to make up your own. Because there's a lot to it, right? Like the whole timing. We were talking previously about this and how, trying to get the right information at the right time and that kind of stuff is very, there's a lot that goes into it. So I wrote my first story, which got me my agent, Dawn Dowdle, who unfortunately has passed away, but she was a wonderful mentor to new authors. I know JC was with her. I was as well. So, just wonderful in mentoring us through, because there's a lot, like once you finish the creative side of it and writing that first book, there's a whole nother world to it that we're completely blissfully at the time unaware of, right? The whole business and publishing side of it. But if you want to, continue to be a published author, you have to get in line and figure all of that out. And so we, that book still remains unpublished because it was apparently well balanced between romance and suspense and mystery. So one of the publishers were like, it doesn't have enough, right, of this. So I'm like, so I wrote a well balanced book and I can't sell it. Okay. So I went back to the drawing board. I actually got inspired by a guy I met on a plane on my way to the conference for my day job, and the tales that he told me they were very entertaining. But it inspired a character inside my head. And so I asked him, I'm like, hey, are you okay if I kind of use you as a basis for a character in a book? And he's like, absolutely, have fun. And so we stayed in touch. And that was when I finished More Than One Night. And so that was kind of inspired by him. And it was funny, I sent him a picture of the cover, and of course part of the dedication was to him for inspiring the character, and his reply back to me is, I'm way hotter than that guy. So I said, all right, well, maybe next time we'll have you pose, okay? But so I did, in those romance series, there was a 2-book plus a short story prequel, which was in, at the time, Killer Beach Reads that came out, and that compilation hit the USA Today best-selling list, so which was really cool for a young author. Like, it had to be, it was just a matter of being in the right place at the right time and taking advantage of the opportunities that I was given, because I had already wrote book 1. I was working on book 2 when they reached out to me and said, hey, would you be interested in being part of this compilation? But it'll have to be, we talked about it, like, it'll have to be a prequel, because book 1 hasn't even come out yet. So it actually got released prior to book 1 even coming out. So I called up one of my author friends who was my beta reader, and I said, I'd be an idiot not to do this, right? And she's like, yeah. So I started plotting and came up with, so we had More Than One Night, Remember the Night, and then the prequel was called Heating Up the Night. And in book 2, the night that they're remembering was what happened in that short story. So kind of all ties together. So, and I was doing that for Gemma Halliday Publishing, and she had the Danger Cove series, which is a very interesting concept that you don't see a lot. And I think we talked about this a little bit before, but they basically had a town, right? And Danger Cove, Washington, and each author wrote a different part, a different protagonist in that town. And so we all had what we called our Danger Cove Bible. So you knew who the police officers were, what was going on. If you involved other authors' characters, you had to email them and say, hey, just making sure that this fits with your character, that I'm, in context for them. So it was a very interesting and unique experience to coordinate with so many different people. And so Gemma had asked me if I would be willing to write for that series, and I love mystery. I mean, I started off with the Trixie Belden and Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew, and even as far back as Encyclopedia Brown. I don't know if you remember those mysteries, but
I love Encyclopedia Brown.
Yes, yes. So I'm looking forward. My grandson is going to be 6 this fall, and so I'm feeling like he's getting close to start reading those to him and getting him involved in that. But so I was like, sure, I'm happy to try. I said, let me think about, what I could do. And she said, well, I'm open to whatever you want to do. However, I want to let you know that there is an opening at the Smuggler's Tavern. And I'm like, writing about a bar, that could be fun. So created Lily, and, and those who have read the books know that Lily starts from being the bartender and working her way up to the end of her story arc is that she is now part owner of Smuggler's Tavern. So it was fun. It was interesting, though, because she was in her early 20s, and I obviously was much older than that. So I found it was challenging at times. And by the time I was 20, I had a 6-month-old, right? So it was interesting for me to try to write someone so young. So I decided that if I ever started a new character, I was going to say, can they please be a little bit older, right? And I think we are getting to, as a fiction group, like for mysteries, cozy mysteries, I think that people are becoming more and more accepting of older protagonists. Like they can be in their 30s, and I know I've seen some even on Instagram that tend to be even older than that. So Sadie is 30, so I'm like, okay, that I feel they've been around life enough that they can handle deeper, more difficult challenges than what you would throw at a 20-year-old. So so I wrote the 4 books for Danger Cove, and then I took a break for a little bit, and then I got the offer for the 3-book deal from Harbor Lane for Sadie Sabatini, and so I got my 30-year-old protagonist, and I got to tell a new story, which was kind of fun. And this time it was all just me. There were no one else that I was coordinating with, which was good and bad, right? Because sometimes it helps to have people to bounce it off of and say, well, what's going on in your part of Danger Cove, right? So
Well, I just want to say, folks, if you haven't read any of the Danger Cove books, I'll admit the only ones I've read have been Lily's books, but they were so much fun and they're fabulous. Do yourself a favor, check them out because they are. I mean, they're better than they're better than advertised, honestly. And Nicole, I love your stories and
I
the whole thing
appreciate that.
there.
JC, thank you.
Yeah, but so enough about Lily. Sadie, you mentioned she's back.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about vengeful conspiracy.
Right, exactly. The things we do for marketing, right?
Yes,
Um,
yes.
so in book one with Murderous Consequences, obviously Sadie is coming into town. She's trying to kind of start over. She's, started out a new path, a new chapter in her life. She's trying to leave. She was happy with what she did in her past, but she's ready, obviously for those of you who have read it know that, there was some risk involved in that. So she wants to just settle down and kind of have a normal life. But when you've been a con artist for that many years, it's bound to happen that your past life is going to come back, right? And we saw a little bit of that in book one, but when you think of the story arc, and I know Sarah and I were talking about this earlier, so in a 3-book deal, you have to figure out what the story arc is going to be. So the first one is Sadie meeting the town members. Everyone gets kind of introduced to them. We start to see the personalities of the town and the people and things like that. Well, in book 2, that's kind of like the middle. And so at that point, Sadie has her old life and her new life tugging at her and trying to each side, she really wants to start over, but we meet some of her team members from the past. They were alluded to and mentioned in book 1, but we actually meet some of them in book 2. And there's a lot of hurt, right, at the way when the team kind of ended things and moved away, even though, and this happens a lot to us in real life, right? We have good intentions for what we do, but it affects people differently. And so they react in sometimes not so positive ways. So Sadie's intentions were good. She wanted to keep everyone safe. So they split and went their separate ways. Well, some of the team members struggled with that. And without that support of that team, then they took on things on their own and got themselves into some trouble. So she's trying to take care of the things in the present. And in this book, she actually gets arrested for manslaughter, not murder, even though the detective, the deputy, when he arrests her, does it for murder, which was kind of a fun thing to write. I did a lot of research in the difference between the two, which that's why authors always say, if anything ever happens to me, delete my search history, right?
Yes.
So, how much is bond for manslaughter versus how much is bond? Is it possible to get bond for murder? Those type of questions. But so Sadie's now trying to save herself, but she's also trying to help her team. And she's also, hiding her past life from her new friends starts to have its toll and take its toll on some things too. So she has to work through that. And of course with Jeremy, who we know he's kind of like a black and white kind of guy. And whereas Sadie operates in the gray, there was some angsty moments between them, but we made him okay in the end. So that's what counts, right? That's what we have to do.
Yes, but the angst, of course, our opening scenes that we have, one thing that I really love about your writing, Nicole, is that you throw us into the moment and we're there, we're ready to go. It's not kind of those winding things that can, and I'm guilty of doing this myself, where it's I kind of take my time winding things up. But I just we're just thrown into what's going on in Sadie's life. We've got this town election that's got everybody up in kind of, everybody's a little bit bothered by, what's going on. And we have a particular person who is in the running that is a figure from Sadie's past and not in a good way. Right. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the new characters that we have at play here. But first, I do want to acknowledge that we have Ashley joining us, saying hello to everyone. Mizan has said, I was a fan of Encyclopedia Brown. I've thought about rereading them, some of them even now. I highly recommend doing that. It's so fun to go back and see the stories that recaptured us, our imaginations. And we also have,
see if we can figure out who done it. Right?
Yeah.
We can get to the theme.
Yes, I feel so I did this with a couple of the Nancy Drew books. I think last year I read a bunch of them just to like re-experience Nancy. And it was amazing how much I remembered from like these books that, you know, I read 20 plus years ago at this point. And it was just like, oh my gosh, it's amazing how these stories stick with us. But we also have Ryan saying that he was a fan of Encyclopedia Brown, the Hardy Boys, Sherlock Holmes, and Agatha Christie. So we've got a lot of similarities with the books that started our love of mystery that brought us here today. So we have in Vengeful Conspiracies, and I think maybe to kind of remind our audience members of is Sadie is, yes, she is a con artist, but she was like a Robin Hood con artist where it was like she was taking down bad guys. Yeah. So and so the individual that she encounters this time around, he is like when I was reading his background about like doing pharmaceutical, like illegal or poisonous testing with pharmaceuticals, I'm like, gosh, that's really bad. How do you
like? He's not a good guy.
How do you come up with these like kind of evildoers of the past? Is that something that you have fun with? That you're like, how rotten can I make this person so that like there's no hard feelings when it comes to, yes, like Sadie and her team bringing them down?
Yeah. I mean, I watch a lot of like the crime drama shows and things like that. So you get a lot of ideas, you know, just like we were talking earlier, JC, and you're like, oh, I've got some ideas now, some plot bunnies running around in my head. And so I think anyone who writes, especially mysteries or suspense and well, even romance, right? You see something that you're watching on TV and it kind of gets a spark. And so, but of course, big pharma and all the big co-op ag groups, you know, they're always in the news about one thing or another. And so, you know, I try not to make my bad guys like super evil. I mean, it's a cozy mystery, right? And I don't like to get my head into like real darkness, right? That just, I don't want to go there. And it's hard to stay light and fun when you're into real darkness. But, you know, he was, and a lot of times the bad guys think they're doing, you know, the right thing or the wrong thing for the right reasons, right? And so the end justifies the means. And so, I mean, one of my greatest examples that I love, if anyone watched Breaking Bad, and I didn't watch it when it was originally coming out, but if you ever have a chance, I'm sure it's still on streaming services, but talk about, as an author, we learn a lot about goal, motivation, and conflict, right? The GMC. And, you know, what do they want? Why do they want it? And who's standing in their way? And the principle is that if you can basically convince someone that the reason why someone is doing something that everyone else would think was bad, but if they're doing it for enough good reasons, we're like, you know, maybe I don't want them to get caught. I know why they're doing this and I want them to be successful. And so the arc that the writers took the Breaking Bad character, the main characters through, you know, by the end, this good guy who was doing the wrong things for the right reasons turns out to be really bad guy, and the guy who was bad in the beginning turns out to be the guy you're cheering for and wanting him to succeed. And so it's just masterful when you start thinking about that. So when I take my bad guys, I want someone who in their own minds they could justify why they were doing it, even if the rest of society and the people who were negatively impacted by it, and in this case it happened to be one of Sadie's team members' grandparents who were ill from the testing, right? So she took that
so she has
very
that personal
personally.
connection.
Yes. So that always makes it hit closer to home. And so, I mean, a lot of times, you know, I'll see headlines or characters, even bad guys on TV, and I'll take something about that, and then I'll move it into my own character, right? So, and that's where the imagination and the fun comes in when you get to do that, right? So
there's the story that you were talking about of like this innate sense of, you know, it's a fine line of rooting for the bad guy versus rooting for someone who is, you know, like the anti-hero or somebody who's just kind of like sticking it to the man. And I just listened to the story of DB Cooper, which I think I probably had heard the name, but I had no idea who DB Cooper really was. But the fact that like, you know, this man basically took a plane hostage and, you know, disappeared into legend. but the fact that like there were so many people that were like, oh, that's awesome, because like he didn't hurt anyone, but he also was like, oh, like I got some money, I got like all of this stuff that you know,
Right? He
to kind of
stole
sticking
money
it.
and
Yeah, and it was
hijacked a
just
plane, right?
exactly. It's like, and it's just like, wow, like the public perception of this, of these people who do wrong things. Yet, what is it about like these instances that like pull at our sympathies?
Right.
And it just makes you think of like, wow, like how like wild the human like psyche is.
Right. Because I'd even say to myself, like, why do I not want him to get caught? He is a drug dealer. He is a
Mhm.
bad guy. But he's just trying to do right for his family, right? So
Mhm.
we like, there's that internal struggle that we have. And that's, as authors, what we want to create for our readers too, is like that tug. I mean, you know, Sadie was a con artist. Did she use her skills for good? Yes. But she basically tricked people and manipulated people. And that typically is not a good thing, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, it's one of those, but if we help people understand why they did something, we make more allowances for them. I mean, think about even Jack Reacher, right? The famous character of Lee Child. I
Mhm.
mean, I love watching the Jack Reacher series, but he kills lots of people every
Yeah.
single episode. And I'm like, you know, technically, like, and he's not a law enforcement agent, right? So I mean, at the end of the day, that's kind of murder, right?
Mhm.
So, but we're like, yeah, he got the bad guys, right? So it's like, so we let him off the hook because he's got the bad guys, but that's only because we know he's a fictional character, right? Even in
Mhm.
real life, we like, okay, you still can't take the law into your own hands, right?
Yeah.
But that's kind of the things that we go through when we're writing or reading fiction. We give a lot of allowances for characters who at least we understand why they are the way they are
Mhm.
and why they're doing what they do. So it's kind of fun to create that dilemma inside of our own head and then a reader's head to be like, I know this is wrong, but I want him to get away with it. I want him to succeed, you know? And so it's kind of fun. So,
Well, yeah, I mean as Sarah knows, I've been binging the Slow Horses books by Mick Herron, and you know I think of Jackson Lamb, the guy who's in charge of Slough House, and he is the most repugnant, repulsive, ill-mannered, slovenly character I think I've ever read. And yet I'm rooting for him and his team to succeed, and it reminds me so often. And you know, the three of us, especially as crime writers, you know, we're told your characters don't necessarily have to be likable, but you have to figure out a way to make the reader care about them
Mhm.
and root for them. And Nicole, you do it in spades every time.
oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. I
But you
try.
also have a lot
Because
of
I want
likable
my heroes
characters.
and my victims to be that.
Yeah.
Say what?
I said you also have a lot of likable characters in your books. So
Yeah, I do like to have like because I feel like the more likable the characters are, the more people want to read about them and learn about them. I know a few people in the reviews, they're like, well, we just started to get to know people in the town, and so I really want to learn more about them. So hopefully they
Mhm.
felt like in book 2 that they started to learn more about them and kind of get some more backstories. I mean, you can't tell everything in book 1 because then there's no reason for
Exactly,
book 2,
yeah.
right? So we kind of give you enough to, you know, eat enough pieces of the pie or bites of the pie to satisfy you to hold you over till the next pie is brought out,
Mhm.
right? So it's kind of fun. And we, you know, Sadie's arc kind of goes through, but we see like some progress, right? By the end with regards to, you know, especially her and Jeremy's relationship. And because I mean, they have, you know, in romance, we call it the black moment, right? And they say, you know, that's when you think all hope is lost. Well, Sadie and Jeremy had a black moment in this book where you thought, okay, that's it, they're done. It's not going to happen, right? Maybe they can be friends afterwards, but by the end, we come back around and we're like, okay, maybe there is hope, right? So, and I found that I just finished not reading not too long ago, Sarah, you can't handle the truth, and I
Yeah.
felt bad for Hazel, right? Because I'm like, she's not ever going to be able to find love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but by the end, you know, we see that her character has progressed to the point where she's saying, maybe there's a way I can make this work.
Mhm.
And I'm like, yes, come on, Hazel, you can do it. You can
And
do it. So,
I love that is what cozy mysteries give us in all forms, that you know, no matter what is going on in the world around us, it's like, you know, we always have that warmth of a cozy of like good will win in the end, and
Yes.
you know, our characters will end up happy. Yes, maybe where they're going to go through some bumps and some tribulations to kind of to get there, but it's like we want our characters to be happy. Like I don't want
Right.
them to to suffer. So it's that's one that I just love that about the cozy mystery genre so much.
Well, and I mean, in life, we all have bumps, right, that we have to get
Yeah.
through. I mean, life isn't perfect. It isn't, something that goes through and everything is fine. So, if our characters didn't go through some trials and tribulations, then we'd be like, okay, I mean, I know it's fiction, but that's not even close, right, to what life is like.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but
Well, and little bonus, folks. Both books happen to be and by both books I mean Murderous Consequences and I keep getting them mixed.
No, you got it right. You got it.
Sarah, you take it.
Right.
It's Murderous Consequences and Vengeful Conspiracies.
There we go.
I know.
Yes, and they're both on sale right now, folks. So go get them if you haven't read them yet. Because I bought them both. So there.
Yes, book one
Thank you.
one is 99 cents and book two is $2.99. So those are really good book deals.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And we have.
Hey.
I was just going to say,
ahead,
we've got a couple folks chiming into the chat in regards to our conversation with Breaking Bad and such. Sawdust was saying Better Call Saul is another one of those shows us that. And then Ashley says, I love a happy ending, but love the angst too. So we need that. Yeah, we need that angst.
Means more.
Exactly.
Right? If we have a little angst. If everything is perfect, then the happy ending doesn't seem quite as, important. Right? If they haven't had to come through something to get together and so I like it, and it's fun to put your characters through a little angst and keep them on their toes, right? So
well, hey Nicole, unfortunately we've only got a couple more minutes, which is a total bummer because you are just the greatest ever, and it's always so fun to hang out with you. One of the things that I do want to ask real quick is you mentioned that you took a few years off from writing and then got back into it. That had to be a little bit of a challenge itself because I was always taught that as writers, it's a skill. It's just like anything else. It's like shooting free throws. You got to keep it up to keep yourself sharp. Can you talk about the challenge of coming back after a little bit of time off? And you've gotten these fabulous books. So a little inspirational footnote story, folks. It's okay to take time off and come back. So how was it for you?
I mean, I think that we have to recognize, I know Sarah and I were talking earlier before the interview started, because I have a day job and then I have my author stuff and then I have another side job that I do with public speaking. And ironically, I don't know if you guys can tell or not, but I'm actually sitting in my car now because I've done all 3 jobs today now. So
dedication.
I did a speaking engagement this morning. I met with one of our members for my day job after that. And then I'm on my way home and I stopped and pulled over. I'm at a Circle K just in their parking lot and to do this because this is always so much fun and you guys are great hosts and I really appreciate it. So I didn't want to miss it, but I wasn't going to be home in time. So that's what we do. So, there's a lot of balancing and juggling, and that's in addition to spending time with family and friends. And my family is amazing in their understanding. Like, it's better now because I figured out a lot of things about the writing process and I know what I need to do. But in the beginning, I spent a lot of time, as we authors call it, in the writing cave. And so, my daughter was older, so she didn't require as much attention, but still I was locked away in my office, trying to figure out what happens next. I remember one time I was in my chair, just kind of slowly circling around saying, what happens next? And my husband opened the door and he goes, nope, and just closed it and went back. So, but with doing, when you're juggling all of those kind of things, and then I had decided to take a break even before COVID happened, but it was probably the timing worked out well because it's really hard to write lighthearted, fun, and romance and stuff when the world is in a state of uncertainty, right? Regardless of where you come down on the whole COVID thing, the bottom line is that the world had never experienced, at least not our generation, right? Mm-hmm. Something of that magnitude. And so, and we lost some family members. And so it was a time for me to kind of heal and just kind of restore my energy, right? Because it takes a lot of energy to do this and to write these things. And, when you guys get the finished product that you can read in a few hours, I mean, my daughter is one of the fastest readers I've ever known. But she gets the points too, right? Because she can tell me about a book and talk about it and she can tell me all the things, right? But it takes hours, as you guys can attest, of writing and revising and, and then even once it goes to your publisher, there's at least 1 to 2 rounds of edits. And so it just, it's a lot of time. And so I decided that I needed to kind of focus on myself for a little bit, restore the energy. And so, but if you're an author, a writer, a creative being, whether it's, writing stories or telling, painting or writing music, whatever it is, when that's inside of you, you can't just not do it, right? So whether I decided, so I started with fan fiction. I went back and wrote a couple short fan fiction stories. And then I was like, okay, I'm getting back in my groove. And so that was a good ramp up back into it. And then I started coming up with, the plot and everything like that um, for Sadie. And so, yeah, and then just got back into it. And then, like I said, it's fun, but it's a lot of work. So,
Well, we're very glad that you took that time to recharge and that you
Yes.
came back
Yeah.
better than ever.
Mhm.
And it, of course, Nicole, it's so wonderful to chat with you. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay. Thank you for having me. I
Congratulations on the release of Vengeful Conspiracies, which is available now where books are sold. Our wonderful audience members, thank you guys for being here. We always
Thank you all for being
appreciate
here.
your comments and you checking in with us. We'll be back with another episode tomorrow afternoon. Our guest is Vicki Delaney, who also writes as Ava Gates. We're going to be celebrating her new release as well. So we've got more bookish times ahead for you all. We appreciate you. And until we see each other again, stay bookish, everybody. Have a good rest of the afternoon. Bye.
All right. Thank you guys. Bye.